kind of extreme candidates who sometimes do much better than expected. Because what it takes to win the caucus is for me to get, let's say that I'm an extreme, kind of slightly crazy person, but I have a lot of friends. Okay, let's say I'm like one of these like crazy homeschoolers, right? And I get all these crazy homeschoolers from Kalamazoo and Van Buren County. I said, I want you to come do the caucus with me. I want you to be my candidate in the caucus. All right? Now, homeschoolers make up about what percentage of the population? Like 2%. Okay? So we're 2% of the population. But within the Republican Party, let's assume we're going to run within the Republicans, because Democrats don't homeschool. That's not entirely true. I shouldn't say that. Look, let's go with the Republican Party. So within the Republican Party, you probably have more people who homeschool than within the Democratic Party. Certainly my friends who are Democrats think I'm crazy. My friends who are Republicans say, wow, that's a good idea. So there's a division there. So within the Republican caucus, homeschoolers make up a chunk, say maybe 10%, 10, maybe 15% of Republicans in this area. Okay. I say, let's all go to the caucus. I want you to vote for me. Now, all that I need is a whole bunch of people to carve out a few hours to commit getting behind another homeschooler for a few hours to run for this office. I could probably get that done. Because homeschoolers are the kinds of people, they can get behind stuff like that. Okay? But not just homeschoolers. I mean, this happens all over the political, think about gun rights people. They are a highly motivated, relatively small subset of the population. Think about the same-sex marriage pushers, not just the people who are like, yeah, all right, but people who are like, yes, absolutely, die hard. Right? They are full-on committed to this. Okay? They are highly motivated to participate in this process. So what happens in the caucuses is because they require a lot of attention and a lot of energy, the kind of people who show up tend to be kind of extreme or absolutely sold out and committed to a particular idea. Whereas in a general election, it's harder to do that for a general election, go take your 10 minutes, because lots of people can go take that 10 minutes, but not very many people are committed to take that a lot of time in the thing. Okay, so that's kind of the rules of the process, right, Josh?
Which do you think is better? Because I kind of like debate, but do you think that there are too many disadvantages to a caucus?
I think the question is, which one is better?
Yeah.
I don't know that one is better than the other. I think there are two different processes, both of which have a long history in democratic societies.
If you were charged with deciding how the primaries will be held, which would you use? Like, which do you think?
So if I were in charge, so here's the nice thing. To put me in charge of making the rules, right? What does that mean I possess?
Power? A lot of it?
Right. I not only have the power to kind of set the agenda, I have the power to pick rules that I can reasonably predict what the outcome will be. So if I'm a savvy politician, I kind of know what's going on and I know what the impact of rules are. Big takeaway from the lecture from last week is the rules matter. If I'm the person who gets to set the rules, that gives me a lot of influence. So what I would do is I would say, who's out there? Who do I want to win? Which set of rules look fair but will give my favorite the best chance of winning? Sometimes it's not quite as crass as that. For example, Republicans, as a rule, tend to be much more calm, level-headed, not as riotous and raucous as Democrats. Democrats are much more likely to be more disruptive and raucous. They're comfortable with a little bit of social disorder. They're okay with that. So I think that Democrats prefer the caucuses because it provides it's a way for them to vent a little bit and to get some energy and create some camaraderie. Republicans just want to do what they have to do, win, and go home. Okay, so in general, the personality types of Democrats and Republicans tend to be different. Republicans are very concerned about who shows up. For example, if I'm a Republican and I know that there's an extremist group in my community, like those crazy homeschoolers, and I take those crazy homeschoolers and I think, I really don't want that candidate to win. They're getting behind that Wielhouwer guy. I really don't want that guy to win. Okay, I don't want to create an environment in which they are empowered. I want to create an environment in which their influence and their power is kind of spread out and dispersed a bit. Okay, but if I'm in favor of the extremist, I might want an environment in which an extremist can win. This shows up in another way. There are actually two kinds of primaries. They've got very complicated terms to describe them. Closed and open. They have different rules for who gets to participate. Right? This is the way it works. In a closed primary system, when people register to vote, their names go on a list. In states that use a closed primary system, and when you register to vote, you select a political party with which you want to affiliate. So, for example, I grew up in Connecticut. The first place I registered to vote was in Connecticut. When you live in Connecticut, you register to vote, and then they ask you, there's a place on the form, are you going to register as a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, Green Party, I mean, whatever your party is? Which party do you want to be a member of? You're not really a member, you just registered with that party. What that means is that when the primaries come to Connecticut, and I go to vote, they've got a list of people who are registered as Democrats, a separate list of people who are registered as Republicans, and a separate list of people who are registered as others, and then another list of people who are registered but have not affiliated with a political party. If I want to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary, I have to already be registered as a member of the party. So I register to vote, say I want to register as a Democrat. In order to vote in the Democratic primary, I have to be on the list of Democrats. If I am not interested in the Democrats and I want to go vote in the Republican primary, I go in there on election day and I say I'd like to vote in the Republican primary, and they'll look at the Republican list, your name's not here. I say, well, I'm registered as a Democrat, but I want to vote in the Republican primary. They're going to say, I'm sorry, you can't. You can only vote in the Democratic primary. And then you have people who, like my father-in-law, who is unaffiliated. When he registered to vote in Connecticut, he doesn't pick any party because he doesn't trust any of them. Smart guy. But what that means is when the primaries come along, he can't vote. So the primaries come along, he wants to vote in the Republican or the Democratic primary. He can go down to the election place, his name's on the list of people who are registered to vote, but he's not registered with a party, so he can't vote in the primary. Okay? Contrast that with an open primary. With an open primary, the rules are this. You register to vote, and there is no party registration. When you go to vote in the primary, then there's a list of people who are registered to vote, and they say, would you like to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary? I say, I think I'll vote in the Democratic primary. Here's the Democratic ballot. Walk over, cast your vote, and you're done. But I can only pick one. Can't pick multiple ones. All right? So that's an open primary. So the basic difference is this. With a closed primary, only people previously registered with a party get to participate. With an open primary, anybody who's registered to vote can participate in any primary, but only one. Okay? So what's the practical difference? The practical difference is this. That if let's say I'm in the Democratic Party in my county or in my state, and I'm concerned that I'm going to get a bunch of Republicans casting votes in the Democratic primary to kind of mess around with the system. Then I'm inclined, my preference is to say the rule that we're going to use is we're going to make this a closed primary. You have to be registered as a Democrat in order to vote in the Democratic primary. So we're going to close it. The political parties like this. In general, the parties prefer a closed system because they can control who gets in and votes, and it's more predictable. An open primary is preferred by people who are in the state government, but they want more competition and they want flexibility. They want people to have the ability to choose at the last moment who they're going to vote for in a primary. And so they don't want to force them way ahead of time to register. So part of the power is which set of rules am I going to use? If I'm a nonpartisan person, I want things to be as open and fair as possible, then I'm going to do what I can to create an open system, an open primary system. But if I'm a hardcore partisan and I'm a Democrat and I don't want Republicans monkeying around with my votes, then I'm going to prefer a closed system. And so if I have the power to do so, I'm going to create that kind of a set of rules. Okay?
Does Michigan specifically use open or closed primaries?
Michigan is an open primary state. Yep. So any given presidential or congressional election, you can walk in on the primary election day and you can say, I'd like to vote in the Democratic or the Republican primary, either way. You can do it.
But only those two?
Well, no, you can vote in the Libertarian Party primary if you want to, or the Green Party, or the Beer Party, or the whatever party. Yeah.
Is that like a real party?
Yes.
A beer party?
I don't know if it's real here in Michigan, but there are states where there's a real beer party.
Is that just like, it happens to sound the same? It actually named after beer?
Yes. Not just named after beer, it's named for beer.
Are they trying to like revive the tradition of like bringing people in wagons to vote with all the beer?
Well, I think they have a narrow political agenda. You could say they have a narrow political agenda. I mean, there are parties organized around these kinds of issues. The Green Party, for example, is now fairly influential, for example, in Germany. Started out as this very small splinter group of crazy environmentalists. And look what they've grown into. I mean, the Greens are very influential all over the world now. So, okay, a couple more things. We have a few more minutes. The early states, Iowa and New Hampshire, are very influential. Now, what's interesting about these states is that they're almost entirely white. There are almost no minorities living in these states. They are very small states. They're states whose economies are very narrow. So what that does for candidates, because they're small, it gives, in terms of population, it gives the candidates the ability to meet a large proportion of the voters. You know, if I've only got, let's say there are 1 million people living in my state, that means that in terms of the number of people who are actually going to vote in a primary, we're talking about maybe 100,000 at best, at the most. You know what, over the course of 2 years, I could meet a pretty large chunk of 100,000. And I figure half of those are Democrats and half of those are Republicans. So if I'm a Democrat, I only have to make a plan over a 2-year period to meet 50,000 people. I could do that. Get enough meetings or go out in front of enough factories. I could meet a pretty large proportion of 50,000 people. Okay? In California, you couldn't do that. California's got 55 million people in it. Okay, there's no way to do it. So these small states make it easier for candidates to run and to do old-time, handshaking, baby-kissing politics. It makes it easier for those states. Okay. Where we'll end up going next week, we're going to talk about 2 things next week. The first one is, within this nomination process, going back to that question, how did Democrats convince other Democrats that they're better than other Democrats to be the winner? And then we're going to talk about the Electoral College. So, any final questions? No?
Like telling them that they'll manipulate the laws so as to change the tax code so that the things that those particular Democrats support, they'll tend to not have to pay with them?
Okay. That could be a strategy. Thanks very much. Have a great week.